In the last video, we have solved the curious case of missing IDs. But today we are going to actually focus on something which is even more pesky, and that is the lying IDs. And in order to visualize this, I have prepared a kind of a small proof of concept of the authentication form, and we are going to take a closer look at it. So you know the drill. You are presented with something like this, a simple authentication form. Let's say this is a React or an Angular app. And so you want to actually locate some of the elements. So you want to locate the first field, you right click and then inspect. The old and trusty DevTools console appears on the right hand side, and you see something like this. So your first intuition might be to actually target this because this is an ID, so we are really good, right? Because we can uniquely identify the element. But the problem is, whenever you see these weird strings of numbers or hashes at the end of the ID, a big red light should start alarming you in your head. Because such numbers, more often than not, inform you that this is some kind of randomized garbage. This may be a timestamp, this may be a hash added by the framework, but either way, this will probably change sooner than later when someone rebuilds the component or triggers the build or something like that. So, of course, your intuition might be to actually copy this and check the locator like hashtag this. So we have learned that hashtag denotes an ID. So yeah, of course, you have localized the element now. But the truth of the matter is, this is very, very unstable and it will change at any moment. And of course, it's not your fault that the IDs are messy, but it is your job to kind of navigate through the chaos and lock onto the actual signal in order to create locators that will still be stable throughout the chaos. Welcome to Testeroni. I'm Casper and I'm here to teach you all to become test automation engineers one slice at a time. So first of all, let's fix this conundrum using CSS. So remember that when you are in the elements page, you can just do Ctrl F for the search bar to appear if you don't have it open already. And so we know that hashtag denotes the ID that we are looking for in CSS. But we can actually treat ID as if it was any other attribute. And this will be a more verbose way of targeting the attributes because you'll not always be using the ID to target. So we can do ID equals this. And in order for this to work, we need to encompass this in square brackets. And so we know that we have the locator properly locating this element. But we have already established that this is not a good ID to base our automation on. But we can see that it has the user field at the beginning, which looks like a good part of the ID. Like this will probably stay stable. You need to develop some kind of an intuition for that, and you need to check in the rest of the code, of course, if it doesn't appear. But in this scenario, it looks like this part is stable and this part is being randomized. So we want to target only the beginning. And CSS helps us with this using a thing that is called a wildcard, a caret symbol. So when you do a caret symbol, let me maybe even enlarge this so that you can see it clearly. When you do caret equals, then it matches to the beginning of the string. So you can actually remove the ending and it will still target the right element. So we are golden. We have this input field properly targeted, even though we are only using the stable part. So now, even if the ending changes and tomorrow it's some other randomized garbage, we still locate the field. So remember that in CSS, caret equals means starts with. But what if the randomized garbage is everywhere, not only at the beginning of the string? So I have prepared another scenario for this. When you right click and inspect for the email address, you can see that once again, this does not look like a stable thing that you can base your locator on. But the thing in the middle actually does look like one. But still, we are getting some randomized garbage at the beginning and at the end. The thing in the middle still stays constant, so it looks like we can base a stable locator off of it. And in order to do that, we can use an asterisk operator. So an asterisk equals means match to anything inside. So a contains, it's like the contains function in XPath, which we have learned during one of the previous videos. So in this case, we know that the stable part here is the email input. So once again, we can do asterisk equals email input, and we are locating it properly. Even if this changes, even if something happens at the end, we are still properly getting 1 of 1. So we are getting a clear hit at the input field because we are just targeting any part of it. So we are using a contains. So whether this email input will be at the beginning of the string, the end of the string, or the value of the argument that we are presenting, or whether it will be in the middle, like in this scenario, we are always trying to match it. And finally, if the thing you are trying to target is at the end, let's say we wanted to target this div, which contains the button, so we can see that in this situation, the stable part might actually be the modal wrapper part. So this will probably change. You can even see that it kind of hints at you that it will going to be generated through some mechanism. But the latter part is what will probably stay stable. So we are going to target the modal wrapper part. So in order to do that, we are using the $sign. And so once again, we do dollar equals now, and we use the latter part of the ID. And once again, even if something happens here, the modal wrapper part stays stable because it is at the end of the value of the ID tag. And so once again, we have the caret for matching the beginning, so it starts with function. We have the asterisk for matching whenever inside a string, so that is the contains function but in CSS. And we have the dollar equals for matching the latter part, so kind of an ends with. And now CSS is great, but sometimes you have to use XPath. Like maybe this is the convention at your project, or maybe you need to also use its capabilities in finding and matching text, or maybe you need to navigate throughout the hierarchy also within the same locator. In these situations, you will need to use XPath. So let's try and replicate the scenarios that we have just located using CSS, now using the magic of XPath. So once again, going to the username, right-click inspect, we remember that we had this user field at the beginning, which seemed stable. So we want a locator that will target the beginning of it, kind of, and starts with. And handily, in XPath, we actually have a locator that actually is called starts with. So we can do match any tag using the starts with, so that the ID is user field. And we are getting a hit because we are matching wherever inside the document, we are matching any tag that starts with, so you can see it reads like English, that starts with an ID of value user field. So once again, remember that this wildcard means match anywhere inside the document, an tag inside the document and match anywhere. And then we are using the square brackets for filtering, and then we are utilizing the starts with function. And as it is with every function, it will probably need some arguments from us. So inside the regular brackets, the regular parentheses, we are providing the name of the attribute that we are targeting. In this situation, it is an ID, and the value of this ID as a second argument. So in this case, user field. And once again, we are getting 1 of 1. We are golden. Now for the equivalent of the asterisk equals, so contains, find wherever, we are going to once again jump into the second scenario, so the input of email. And once again, we can do search wherever inside the document. And once again, we can do either the asterisk to match any tag, or we can be more precise. This is also a good habit to get into. So we can target the input exactly. And then we are using the square brackets for filtering, where we are going to utilize the most popular function in all of XPath. So I'm really encouraging you to become best friends with it, but you already know it from the previous video, so it will be a piece of cake. So it is contains, and once again, the first argument is going to be ID, and the second argument is going to be wherever we are matching, so in this case, the email input part. And again, we are getting 1 of 1. You can see now in its entirety, we are matching wherever inside the document. The input, we are filtering using the contains function, and the contains function, similarly to the starts with function, actually accepts 2 arguments. The first of them is what kind of attribute we are trying to hit and what kind of value we are looking for inside of it. And once again, regardless of the changes at the beginning or the end of this string, we are still going to match it. So it is of great help, and contains, you will see contains everywhere with XPath because it is very powerful, and I really recommend you to become best friends with it, especially with all the modern frameworks which do have the tendency to provide a lot of garbage, or like enterprise solutions like Salesforce. You will use contains a lot. And for the dollar equals, I have bad news for you. XPath 1.0, so the version which is still supported in many browsers, does not have an ends with function out of the box. So we don't really have a direct equivalent which you can use as a replacement for dollar equals, which we had as an ends with function in the CSS. So in XPath, you will still need to utilize contains for that. So in the case of the wrapper at the end, we would still need to do a thing like this, just targeting the div inside of an input right now. But still, we can't really do ends with because ends with is not properly supported by all the browsers. And to sum it all up, in CSS, you have for matching the beginning of the string, the caret operator, so caret equals. In XPath, you have the starts with function which accepts two arguments. In the case of matching anything inside a string, you have the asterisk equals in CSS, and you have the contains function in XPath. And in order to match the ending of the string, you have the dollar operator, the dollar equals in CSS, and you still need to sadly use the contains because there is no more precise function inside XPath that would be safe to use regarding XPath 1.0. And this is the cheat sheet that will allow you to navigate through the chaos of dynamic IDs which will appear in your career, and also dynamic attributes of other kinds, because you can always provide some other attribute tag in order to locate it using one of these methods. And so I want to leave you with some final thoughts. So the reality check is that a script kiddie blindly copies an ID or any other attribute they want to utilize and just prays for the best, regardless of whether it looks like it is randomly generated or in part randomly generated or not. But a true engineer recognizes the patterns, recognizes the stable parts of a given attribute, like whether they are at the beginning or in the middle or in the end of a given ID or an attribute or any other kind. So I want you to live with this engineer's mindset. I want you to just create locators that do not expire like milk, but rather will properly survive the next deployment and the next build of a given component. So you just need to learn to lock onto the signal and kind of ignore the noise that's floating all around. You need to be smarter than the framework that isn't making your job any easier, the front-end frameworks. I really encourage you to try and match some elements and locate them using the functions and the wildcards that we have learned today. You can use any website that you can use any modern website and you will come across a lot of IDs or other attributes like that you will be able to train on. So I really encourage you to do that. And I just want you to be sure to keep on rocking.